Hey everybody, we have Drew Arnold here with us. Drew is an award-winning visual effects director working in the cross-section of technology and entertainment. Some of his clients have included Kanye, Beyonce, Klein, Lady Gaga, and he also worked at the Museum of Sex on the Diplo virtual reality exhibition and VR World, where the two of us met. I was helping him make the clouds. So it's a pleasure to be here with you today. And yeah, how's everything been going?
Good, man. Yeah, just want to thank you guys for having me, both you and Jules for having me on here. So I appreciate it. Things are going good, and I'm in the Art-O-Matic Hotel in Sarasota, Florida. It's an art-themed hotel with lots of art from the local art college that I actually went to school at. So I went to Ringling School of Art and Design, and I came back to visit some friends and talk to the faculty and just kind of mill around, go to the beach, and have some fun. So right now I'm working on not getting too much sun and wearing my hippie sunscreen, which I hope works as well as it claims to.
Well, what are some of the things in your childhood that have inspired you to do what you're doing today?
Television. My dad watched a lot of TV. And I got to say, I grew up right next to the woods, too. So I had this semi-city. I grew up in Washington, D.C., so I got a little bit of the city, which was fucking crazy back in the 80s. It was like, right now it's super cleaned up. I go back to visit my parents and I don't recognize the place. But it was the kind of place where you would have people screaming, just crackheads everywhere. The crack epidemic really hit DC super hard. So the weirdness of that definitely opened my eyes up to different realities. Watching a lot of TV, my dad loved it. And I got to play in the woods a lot. So I got to enact a lot of different street vision in the woods. And me and my friends would go way on mental tangents out there, would wage fake wars to armies that didn't exist. We would build forts of crystals in the future.
So when did you become interested in visual effects?
I thought I was going to be a cartoonist for a long time. And there's an aspect of my personality that like compartmentalizes all these personas. I don't have multiple personality disorder, but I have a lot of different ideas of what I want to do. And both a blessing and a curse. I'm mostly cursed. But when I was a kid, I thought I was going to be a cartoonist. Loved Disney. Loved the comic strips in the back of the Sunday papers, so I had to read those, copy them all the time. But the visual effects stuff really started to kick in, and I watched MTV. My dad got cable one year when I was 13 years old, something like that, and I started watching it for the first time. And I didn't. My parents kept me sheltered, so I didn't actually get to hear like rock and roll. Whenever I was like in the car with them, we would listen to like bubblegum oldies and this stuff. So pretty much like on that cable, it fucked up. Like I didn't realize that the world had evolved past the 1950s and 60s in terms of music. And all of a sudden I was like, it was like Guns N' Roses and Metallica and but one music video in particular, Soundgarden's Black Hole Sun, really captured my attention, and I started to think about what was possible with the medium, like what could be done with visual effects. And if you guys aren't familiar with the music video, it's just trippy as fuck. There's like melting Barbies and people's faces are morphing, and it was like so fucked up. And I just like really, it made me want to use drugs. It made me want to make music videos. It made me want to scream and sing along with the song. So, and fortunately for me, I got a chance to do a lot of those things. Unfortunately, now I think the music videos are, when I was doing it, it was essentially the dam was breaking in terms of like, can you get paid for this? I think nowadays it's you can't even expect to recoup your investment as a creative. So if you want to get into the music video industry and have some creative input there, so you just do it for the love, because back in the 90s people were getting paid upwards. I think some music videos were $1 million music videos.
Wow.
Rihanna, usually for top billing artists, Rihanna wants to spend $50,000 now, and that's and that'll essentially get you a day shoot and maybe a little bit of like the post-production. But that's essentially how it's done. And people will take it on. A lot of production companies will take this stuff on at spec just to stay relevant. And they'll do it for basically not so. It's a totally different world right now. One that, you know, I grew up watching, and I'm lucky to have caught the tail. Would be a different thing. I probably wouldn't have done so many music videos, but you know, I'm like I said, I'm fortunate to have caught the tail end of it.
I worked on some music videos back in the day. When I was in high school, I worked on a Lil Wayne music video for Lollipop in Las Vegas. It felt like a student film with an insane amount of money. What happened was he had just gotten out of prison, right? And we were supposed to film with him in a club in the casino. But the club owner agreed to let him do it, but the casino hadn't agreed. And they didn't want people to be distracted from the tables. So the second they found out Lil Wayne was going to enter the building, they said he's not allowed to enter the building. So we lost our location the day before the shoot. So it was like 4 a.m. in the morning, and we had no location. So we had call time in like 3 hours and no location. So the entire shoot for a week about was improvised. It felt like the Wild West a little bit.
That's funny that you use that term. That is how most people describe music video production, and they say there's, because you know there are no contracts. It really is kind of like a tread at your own. Like you get what you can. You know what you're in for at some point in time. So you go into it, and it's called the Wild West by a lot of people. And I have all kinds of friends who will say, never going to happen. Nobody's going to sign your contract. They're just there. Do you want to shoot? Can you show up in 10 days? Shoot this music video. And you should know. Okay, great. Let's go. So yeah, it totally is. And if you're ready to sling your gun, then go for it. You know, have fun.
I assume Rihanna has plenty of money. So what is it exactly that lowered the amount of money that people can now start to work for?
Well, I mean, it was like music videos were literally a way to sell records, LPs, CDs, tapes, whatever. So, you know, I mean, it's just literally like there's the bottom dropped out on it. The music industry changed. The 360, basically record deals are made. They're called 360 deals, which include everything. So it used to be that a musician could get paid, essentially make all of these business decisions separately. You know, do you want to make an album? Do you want to go on tour? What about your merch? All this stuff. And they had a lot of over those business deals. And now what record labels do is they have 3C deals where the record label basically buys out everything the musician can possibly do, and make demands over what they end up doing. So they do have to put out an album. Generally, that isn't the moneymaker. It's tours, it's merch, it's everything that can be schlocked out. So really, the musicians are grinding out, and there's not, the music videos are there. They see them more as a marketing tool than a sales tool, which makes it different. Because, you know, if you see a crazy music video, you're going to go buy the album, right? If you see a crazy music video now, you may or may not go to see Rihanna live, right? So it's just a little bit different.
Do you see a lot of your new projects coming out of not music videos anymore, but a lot of this VR stuff, a lot of these different exhibitions, like what you did at the Museum of Sex? I guess you can do that as well, but an interactive one.
For a hot second, and I up until just recently, I was doing a lot of sort of looking into what's called location-based entertainment market, and VR World were both a part of that sort of thing where it was like, I didn't get invited back because my whole thing is like, look at the numbers and the content isn't there, et cetera. And I was running through all these diagrams. I had numbers. I was getting booed and hissed at these conferences. So what does that mean? Like, why would I say that? Really, it was like VR. You don't have to treat it like a technology that's different than anything else. You can treat it like an experience that people want to have. So, you know, people want to go out to theater. People want to go out and try new things. There's all kinds of different things, especially in New York. And now more than ever, People want to pay for experiences. So, this is like, okay, well, what if we tie VR to that? People want to try VR. They don't want to buy the headset. But they will go to like a space and drop, when we started with $35, $45, whatever it is now, to go to VR World and try all you can eat buffet of virtual reality. Or in the case of Museum of Sex, it's like, let's do storytelling in a new and unique way, and tie together some brands and different people and see what kind of magic we can make there. And I think in that way, it was, there are not many cases of themed VR environments and experiences that aren't either arcades. I think VR World is the largest. It's a little bit beyond an arcade because it's the largest in the Western Hemisphere. I guess there's just nothing that evocative or provocative. So and with that, I think ultimately I'm sort of scaling back right now on the VR location-based market. I may get back into it, but right now I think there's like different modes of storytelling I'm getting into. Right now, really getting into film, coming back to my roots, and doing some things that I wanted to do earlier, but got taken off the track with all this VR, embellishing short form storytelling, being able to create vignettes, being able to create powerful short form videos. And so what I'm working on now is in my free time is a short series of short videos that I'll have on Instagram that explore the fabric and makeup of reality, and we'll see how far I can take it and where I can go with it. Right now it starts with, all of it includes different visual effects experiments that I developed over the years, from everything from stop motion to CG to different kinds of grammetry, getting into live action, all this stuff. And I'm just going to see where it takes it. It's kind of like a free form, a free flow.
So you strike me as somebody who is an auteur, but at the same time somebody who's very pragmatic. Do you see an audience for what you're doing right now to the extent that you'd be able to make a good living off of it? If we're just talking about being an auteur, making these kind of short films.
Like bounty hunting. It's like bounty hunting.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of different ways to look at it. And with respect to like, am I going to look at this and do I have a blueprint for getting paid? Not necessarily. That's not what's important to me right now. You have people telling you what you should do as much as what you shouldn't. And, right now I don't have that problem. I think as artists, you really need to just like free flow and like let it go. And I think even right now, there's this epidemic of really shallow content that is just all over. It is plastered all over Instagram. Emblematic to me of what's going on culturally. And I think people are afraid to do what they want right now in general, not just as artists, as human beings. And people are afraid to say things. People are afraid to do things, to have experiences. Because it's right now we have this paper trail, if you will. We have this digital footprint. So, you have these artists who just are really compromised their work. Everybody wants to do something somebody else has done. And, in the CG world, it's just super shallow. And there's no storytelling. It's totally different than like what was going on in the CG world 15 years ago. There were forums where, and I'm not going to say even that was a great taste, but it's totally different. People were busy making robots and Gundam and all that stuff. Now they're making cubes that turn into a million different spheres and can cycle through a 10-second thing, and it looks cool, is lit well, and we'll probably get them a job doing something. I don't know, but I see a lot of people who are young and trying to do what everybody else is doing. It's just not working for them. So, just have fun. I think what's happening now is just really an output of the 20th century, which is essentially commoditization of experience and really just trying to homogenate ideas. And part of it is just, I think, our nature as human beings to want to replicate ideas that we've seen and iterate. And that's okay. And there should, we shouldn't have a problem with that. But, the reality is that a lot of the times these formats, these channels are, they're all broadcast through, Facebook, whatever. You've got your platforms, and really a lot of the time we're creating value for the platform instead of ourselves. And I think that's what you're seeing. Facebook, let's just say Instagram, for instance. It's a platform that's worth billions of dollars, hosting the content of people who are making that billion for it. Instead of the people making the billions for themselves, the platform is really like sucking up all that money. We're very platform centric. And this is one of the reasons why I don't have a massive footprint on Instagram, is because I never saw the value in creating value for these platforms. And I know really well-known directors who are still trying to make it big on Facebook, or I'm sorry, on Instagram. And it's not working for them. So these guys are getting paid and are making money without it. I don't think, we necessarily need to play the game. I think there's a lot of different ways around it. And I think if people can just look at like what they're good at, digital, I think, has become ubiquitous in the mind of like people, like how to make it, how to be successful. But there are people who aren't attached digitally who are really doing well. They do have a digital presence, but that's not the way they format, and I think we just have to just look very closely at like what is success? How do we measure success? And I think that's what humanity is going to have to face in the near future, because I think like what we're seeing on happiness based around the success we think we should have online. We think that our output can determine like how many views we get, how much money we get, how we monetize our efforts, how we monetize our creativity, how we monetize our time. And a lot of the time it's not, we're not being reciprocated for it fairly.
I was looking at some of the Twitch streamers, and they're really professional at what they're able to do, but they always talk in this really perky host voice. And I feel like having to do that 24/7. I don't know if I'd necessarily be up to that. But what I'm thinking could be done is I am seeing communities on Twitter, on these various social platforms that are kind of like the bacchanalias of yesteryear, of ancient Greece, brought back to life, or the salons that used to exist back in like the 1920s, where we have people who are like-minded, not necessarily around an ideology, but around, let's say, a shared taste in books, just reading a lot of high-quality literature. And they're able to converse with each other and talk about things that elevate the whole group. And those communities are there. And as far as whether it's sustainable or not, there are authors, let's say, like Logo Daedalus, who we both know, who was able to make money from his book, Selfie Suicide. So I see that as a possible venue for people to be able to connect with people, not even for making money, but just making some kind of an impact in the lives of people that resonate with them.
There's like the photographer's dilemma. It's been around since the camera, which is, do you separate yourself from the experience that you're documenting? And it's been talked about for a long time, long enough that I think that the answer is yes. When you are documenting or trying to document your experience, you're separated from the experience. You don't become an impartial observer anymore. You become somebody who is judging the experience that they have. And that does, that changes the experience dramatically. And I know a lot of people, and I've actually seen, I think people's use of social media in their life is dwindling. I see that people are posting less on Facebook. Facebook and Instagram are having a terrible time right now in terms of trying to create value around their product, which I think is why Facebook had to turn to cryptocurrency and all these other, VR. And ultimately, I think what is really good for people to do is to go out and have real world experiences, go get dirty, and it's not just for kids, because I think people put a lot on children and development of children, but I think adults are just as susceptible to the same inputs. We talk a lot about how you shouldn't give children access to an iPhone or an iPad before a certain age. But, what does that mean? Like, it's okay for kids, but adults can be on their phone 24/7. And I know people talk about teenagers shouldn't have this, but I see adults who are 55, 65 years old who are glued to their phones. Mm-hmm. So it's ubiquitous. It's not just the millennials anymore. It's affected everybody. You know, like I think probably at some point a generation is going to reject it outright. I mean, this is going on with television as well. There will be something else that comes around to replace social media. It'll be antiquated, just like television was and radio was. And there will still be grandma and granddad will still, you know, watch it. But so at some point in time, a generation will have some sort of chip in their brain, thanks to Elon Musk or something else, and they'll be in another little matrix. When you see Wim Hof doing what he's doing and basically destroying what we thought were norms of the human body, you know, a human can only hold their breath for so long, and I mean, people have surpassed it now. It's 23 minutes underwater you can hold your breath. I mean,
is that with pure oxygen though? Is that like a pure oxygen?
Well, yeah, those are oxygenated. But look, I mean, without being oxygenated, I think it's 14 minutes or something like that.
That is.
I mean, that's a long time.
Nuts.
But look, this is not just Wim Hof. This is the human body that has a much broader capability than you'd think. Like I was in Bali a couple of months ago, and I went to a breathwork workshop, and I held my breath for 7 minutes afterwards, and then like was underwater in cold water for minutes at a time, holding my breath just after that. So it's not like, yeah, but it wasn't, and I could have gone longer. I think nobody thought I was holding my breath anymore. It wasn't like super comfortable after a while, but.
This is amazing that you're talking about this breath work. I don't know if you're aware of the fact that I practice the Wim Hof method for about 3 years now.
Oh, do you? Oh, yeah. No, that's amazing. But how does that work for you?
So this is going to be me as a broken record for everybody who has heard this already. But doing the Wim Hof method has unlocked, I think it's the production of DMT. I'm not exactly sure what it is, but it basically...
Production of everything.
Yes. It unlocked the ability for me to see a ray of light in the center of my vision that turns into various shapes like a triangle, a DNA helix, a cross, and all these swirls of blue and purple vortexes that start to animate themselves. And I have a way of controlling them as well, where I could mold them into different shapes. But the reason why I mention this is I think that much like we have the internet today with ones and zeros, I think that human beings are capable of way more, not just physically, but also as far as what we are able to perceive inside of our mind's eye, where I think that it may be possible for us to connect to another internet, not one of this artificial social media imposed on us by these conglomerates, but actually being able to go a little bit further. Again, when I'm saying this, I'm making really grand assumptions based on intuitions that I have, so there is no way I could currently prove it. But it is romantic.
You're never going to prove it. It's never going to happen. They've been trying for hundreds of years. That's the ether. The ether will never be put into a test tube and run through a laser microscopy or whatever it is. Never going to be proven, except through the experience of the individual, and that's it.
I'm very skeptical of that that mental internet that Lev talks about. I think if there's anything, there's more like a smoke signal equivalent. Like if you're gonna have some kind of like psychic activity, it's not gonna be like the Shining variety as much as it is gonna be like the smoke signal.
Sounds like you need to start doing some breath work. I'll just put it this way: there's nothing to stop you, and I think people have a lot of judgment around what is possible. But I challenge everybody to actually go out and do a real vipassana, which is like a retreat, a silent retreat, to do long form meditation, to push themselves past what they think they're capable of and watch what happens. I think that we spend a lot of time as a society speculating what the human body is capable of, less trying it, because we judge the experience. And really, in the grand scheme of things, we live to be upward 80 years old, sometimes less. To spend 3 days breathing is not going to be a waste of time at all. Maybe it'll cost you a couple $100 to have the experience. Try it, see what happens. I've personally have had some amazing transformations that I'm not going to repeat because this is broadcast, but I will back Lev up and say that there are very strange phenomena out there in the universe that are observable, sober. You don't have to take DMT. You don't have to take some psychotropic drug. You don't have to go to the Amazon to see it, and even though I'm grateful for the experiences that I have had not sober, which are very similar, I have to say that, and this gets back to what we're talking about with technology and social media, that all we are is re-engineering technology that exists in the universe already and have been talked about for millennia. The Akashic Records, for example, is really a type of internet, a type of storage database that exists in another dimension. In all these Brahmic texts, you can look at in all of these really old mystical translations to find that virtual reality was talked about by Plato, in the cave allegory. And he was talking about projections of, you can read into it any way you want, but we know that he was a mystic. We know that he was into eating mushrooms. We know that he was doing all this crazy stuff, and he was observing phenomena through these mystical transmissions. So we know for a fact that Plato would write about it at some point in time. And when he wrote the allegory of the cave, he was talking about people who were blinded to reality, that lived in a cave. They had they basically were watching shadows from a fire behind them. And what the cave allegory really was about was the reaction of those people once they saw the light. So if you took those people from their cave and showed them the real world, the light would blind their eyes. Would they be able to see forms? Probably not. But what would their reaction be? And for the most part, what he said is most people would have their eyes blinded and want to go back in the cave. For the most part, if you describe to people this blinding light, would they want to see it? No. Would they be comfortable where they are? Yeah. Would they want to continue to see what they're seeing? Yeah. So I think what I'm saying is that it's really no burden to go out and try these things. And I think that maybe most people aren't really care to do it. But look, man, you live once, right? Why sit in an internet chat room? Why be on Facebook? Why spend all this time wasting your time looking at what other people are doing? Look past the veil. It's there are all these different techniques that are available to you. It's not just Wim Hof. Wim Hof learned it in India. He claims he learned it when he was a kid, but that's a lie. Yeah, Wim Hof went to India in his 20s and learned these techniques, and over the course of decades, refined his body's capability. So it's really breaking through to some other level of perception is really not as hard as you think. Meditation takes practice, but when you get there and you become part of the experience, it's completely transformative. And I think more people are capable of it than they realize.
That's incredible. I love that. I love listening to you speak. You should consider being a motivational speaker.
You should consider dropping all the meditation and just 24 hours speaking to the camera. That'll be your new job from now on. But
maybe I'll get there.
But no, I'm definitely resonating with what you're saying. I wish that there were more people out there. I look on Twitter, and I'm seeing all these kids who have cartoon avatars who are listing their gender. And this is pretty much every single person that I'm seeing. Maybe a couple people aren't, but mostly everybody's listing their gender. They're branding that onto their onto their Twitter profile.
I think a lot of time it's satire, no?
No, I don't think it is, honestly, as far as the kind of things that they're posting. I think that people don't really have that much other to latch onto. I was talking with this one dude who was a nice guy, but we were talking about superheroes, and I asked him what superhero he likes, and he likes Storm. And I asked him all right, cool. What is it about Storm that you're really into? And he said that because she's black and she's a woman. And, that's great. But if that's if there's no other heroic thing that you could talk about that she did, it just seems like there is a lack of that search for, what exactly is the satisfaction that I could get out of life? What can I look at as historic, as heroic things? Instead, it's just what gender is this person? Or what sex is this person? Or what race is this person? And that just the cave for me.
Well, I think there's a certain amount of heroism that people get out of changing their gender. I think there's part of the social justice movement is the warrior status of it, right? People feel like they're fighting the power. The truth is that time has come and gone. That was the 80s and 90s, where it took a lot of heroism to stand up and to mark yourself in a time and an era where you would get beat up for it. You could get killed for it. the likelihood that you'd get killed for being a transgendered person is very low, or even beat up now. And it's because of those people. And look, I mean, I appreciate that everybody is standing up for it. I think maybe the push is a little bit too strong and broad. We don't need to all label ourselves, and maybe people do feel like they want to change their gender or whatever. I'm not a part of that community. I don't ever feel like that I need to do that. I do feel like there is a certain amount of trending that's going on with it, that people want to be heard. They want to be a part of something. And this is a way for them to be heard, to express themselves. And the truth is like the 1950s, especially 1940s and 50s, there was a huge push for masculinity and what that meant. And I think the reality of it, what people are reacting to, is the antiquated view of masculinity and femininity, and what they're pushing back on is that. I don't think what they really mean is that they feel like a woman or they feel like a man, but that those antiquated stereotypes don't apply to them. That's just my personal perspective. And I think, I could be totally wrong about this. This is a very sensitive issue for a lot of people, because I think, identity is a huge aspect of the public conversation now. And it's one of the reasons why I don't I don't share anything on Facebook anymore, because I have a huge progressive community that I'm a part of. I respect what they have to say, but generally it doesn't work the other way around, because how you can parse words out in a short format and have people understand you or want to hear you is just not something that's possible right now. Anything can be made of your words right now. And there's been a huge shift away from what being a progressive means. And I was maybe not a radical progressive, but during the Bush years in college, during the Iraq War, I was very much into what now would be called social justice. And I was not radicalized, and anarchists were essentially made the collective of the people who would be making the most noise. And those people, those voices, a very minor amount of people, now are becoming overwhelming online. These are people who would show up and stop. And this has really upset me, because radical progressivism back in like 2003, 2004 meant that maybe an anarchist would come to your community gathering, your anti-war protest, and raise a ruckus about how there was an organizer and how much of the patriarchy they represented. And these are like one or two people that you have to worry about. And they caused a fucking ruckus. In Ringling, this is a Ringling School of Art and Design. At some point in time, we had a healthy group. It was a school of 800 kids. We had about 50 people showing up to our meetings that we held weekly. And I was the primary organizer. And at some point in time, we had an anarchist group come in and essentially push the ship over as much as they could, because I was organizing. I gave them the opportunity to pitch in and be a collective group, but that didn't happen. They were more into having their voice heard than they were in doing the work. And so what I think now, that voice has been amplified in a way that you see a lot of people who want to have their voice heard. And I'm not going to take this back to the social, many social justice warriors, but I will say that a lot of people would rather speak than do any work. And I think that is what is so seductive about this kind of progressive politics, is that all you have to do is type in the box and hit send, upload your message, and that is the work that you do. But very few people are going on the streets. Very few people are doing anything to benefit the society around them with a hands-on approach. It's easy to hit keys on a keyboard. And I'm not going to put this just on the left, because the people on the right had done this during the Bush years and during the Obama years. But it's just the shift, the balance of power, you can see very clearly.
I could definitely understand what you're talking about regarding people valuing their identity. And I don't see anything wrong with that. The only thing that I wish, though, is that at the same time, like, you could be whoever you want to be, but I don't know if that's necessarily enough to fulfill one's life with. Like, if there were other things that people would be inspired by, some purpose in life that they could have, I think that traditionally that has been
fix the system.
Yeah,
right.
Sure, that's part of it. But as far as certain things that people were able to do with their life without having to become a revolutionary. It did involve taking care of people who were around them, like their family, for instance. That was something that I think brought people back to earth, but at the same time allowed them to show their love to people who they really cared about. And I don't know, like, it feels like there's a lot of loneliness going on in the world too, and not enough families.
People in general, I think, we have the opportunity to do a whole lot with our lives to affect the people around us directly, to build friendships rather than coalitions, to build bridges rather than to destroy them. And, I do my best to try to be as even-handed with criticisms about people who are not me as people who are me. And, and I think we all have a lot of work to do in order to get ourselves to a point where we can have a rational and reasonable conversation about who we are as individuals and who we are as a community. And right now that's not being done. And you have our conversation has been hijacked by platforms. And I'm sure you guys have covered this, but, platforms are biased, not just in terms of the politics of the people who work there and what they want done. And, you've seen this, Project Veritas has put out a lot of these recordings about how, Google and Twitter and all these guys are trying to undermine conservative voices. You see it on the quarantine on Reddit right now with the Donald. You see it on the attack the media is doing on 8chan right now, and trying to say that the founders say that 8chan should be eliminated, and then the deplatformization of 8chan through the hosting services who basically building a case because they're saying 8chan hosts content from people who went on who shot up people in El Paso, Texas. I can't remember which one.
Also, sorry to interrupt, but who also posted it on Instagram before somebody else posted it on 8chan. They're not getting rid of Instagram. They're not getting rid of Discord. So it definitely seems to be a coordinated attack on places with more or less anonymity. Well,
exactly. But I think there's something of value to 8chan, and why is 8chan being targeted specifically? And it's not because it's necessarily a place where people are shit posting all day. I think there are very specific people who are posting on 8chan that are causing a problem for the status quo. And I think whether they're real or not, you can look at QAnon as a source for a lot of problems for people right now in the media, specifically because they get people to do research. And I'm sure you guys are familiar with QAnon and have talked about it. Maybe their way, this group or person's way, whether they're real or not, is posting on 8chan, and you see the media regularly attacking QAnon. And spending their time and energy attacking this. I heard something on NPR just the other day talking about QAnon and people wearing Q shirts at Trump rallies. Regardless of whether they're real or not, it's an effective organization. Or an effective outlet. Thousands and thousands of people are watching it, and I think it represents an issue for status quo media. So I mean. This is all part of the deplatformization. Alex Jones was also a big part of this, right? Like they totally got rid of his traditional means of monetization. Visa, MasterCard, or any of these places, you were not allowed to buy his product. Oh, wait, I'm not sure that happened. That was another organization. But basically any method of payment delivery outside of cash is completely restricted to a lot of people right now, and it's going to continue to tighten up. So what you see is, and what you're going to continue to see is, and what I think people on the left don't understand is that it's conservative voices today, but they're next.
I think one of my favorite descriptions of Q, I think it was from Logo Daedalus. He compared it to a Rosicrucian offset or something. I think Q is a big LARP, but it does have real world side effects. But I looked into it a little bit. I haven't dug that deep. It seemed like it was mostly bunk and just a lot of people having a good time and researching, and that's really what's so problematic about it. So I think you nailed it right on the head. But I would I am confident that it really is not real. So if anyone's listening to this and going like, are these cute people? Like, we're not cute people, you know, but I think that this is why we have freedom of speech. And I think that there are dynamic physics of communication that people don't completely understand. And you can't just have only good opinions, like consecrated good opinions online, right? There's a type of motion that describes like the motion of fluids. It's called Brownian motion. And there's this dynamic that happens in conversations where, like, this is what Hegel would call the dialectic, maybe. And it's different than putting forth like a well-researched paper or making an argument. It's what you get through the sum of a lot of people talking, and it's how our brains don't always think linearly. Like, a lot of times people are thinking without thinking, right? Like how Einstein would problem solve sometimes is he would try to clear his head and just go on long walks and wait for ideas to come to him. And what a lot of people don't realize in their lives, this is how the human brain works. If there's a problem you're trying to solve, you try to ignore it, but your brain doesn't really stop working on the problem all the time. Like, I think it depends on how interested you are in the problem and how close it is to your heart, so to speak. But if you've ever been thinking about something for a while and then suddenly you go, like, that's how I'll solve that problem. It could be a creative problem. It could be, I'm not sure. I know this, for example, with when I used to write more frequently. I'd be trying to articulate something and I'd be staring at the screen until my eyes bleed and I wouldn't get anywhere. And so I would just have to like back off and just like put the problem away. And then weeks later or something, it would come to me when I'd be like, oh, this is how I complete that thought. Or this is how I tie this together now. And I think that people underestimate the importance of allowing different types of freedom. And that's really what America is about. And to say like, this is a bad idea, this is a bad conversation, like this person isn't as articulate as this person, therefore like we need to start censoring people so we can recreate the ivory tower that's disintegrating, I think is totally defeats the purpose of what social media can accomplish. And if you look at the Gutenberg press, when that first came out, it totally destabilized the church and everyone in power, because people started talking that never used to talk. People started spreading ideas that never used to spread ideas. And at first it caused a lot of chaos and it probably didn't seem like a good idea. Like when the Gutenberg press first came out, it caused a lot of chaos. The order didn't emerge until much later. And I think right now we're still in the adolescence of social media and we're seeing a lot of this chaos. And it seems like the big tech giants really want to they want to control as much as they can. I understand the nature of that, but I think, you know, this is the time to be having these conversations and to make sure that we stand up for ideals that can maximize everyone's freedom and create a really good, healthy environment that's not a totalitarian dystopian, right?
Yeah, we'll see what happens. But you know, I think that's a good point about sort of the adolescence. And I think what you're seeing is and we look, man, I am absolutely sure that the human spirit and human free will is indefatigable. We will do what we want to do. We will find a way to express ourselves. So the suppression of voices is not going to work. And you've seen it tried over the centuries. But the way I can distill it is like the conversation or the interactions between parents and an adolescent, right? And the more that a parent tries to push back against the adolescent and what this person wants, this is true for me, and I'm apologize to my parents for the experience. But, I rebelled, and the more they pushed, the further I went. And I think what you'll see is that it's not just true for adolescents, it's true for adults as well. It's causing people to seek out forums to say and do the worst. Now, this is anybody who was on the internet decades ago, even pre-internet, before it was still, I guess could still be called the internet, but it was like the BBS system, which was a bulletin board. You basically phoned into somebody's private line and you logged into their computer, and they could have 5 to 10 lines on at a time or something like that. This was the outlet of the future, but people were using it to post the worst stuff that possibly existed because it wasn't allowed in porn magazines. It was like Hustler couldn't print this stuff. It wasn't allowed in Playboy. It wasn't allowed in the Washington Post. It was filled with conspiracy theories. A lot of images that I won't even tell you about now because it's just, a lot of them were just incredibly disgusting. I was 13 years old searching this stuff, and it was amazing to me because it was an outlet for things that I couldn't possibly have imagined existed. But now we have I think this sense of wonder and desire to express themselves and their ideas is not going to be suppressed because people think that people should have the right to say and do certain things on platforms. And I think this is why probably you see these massive rallies that the Trump campaign is putting on, because people do not have the online forum. They don't have the ability to speak. So what do? They take to the streets, they take to organizing in real life. And I think we will continue to see, with more pushback, more people coming together. And I think this is a problem for those who are creating and trying to suppress the vote for conservatives in the 2020. Clearly, Google is in this. Anybody who does a search, type in Donald Trump space, then type in Hillary Clinton space or any Democratic, and you will see a big difference in the search results that come up. Or Obama space, Barack Obama space. Just look at what the natural feedback is on the right and the left, and tell me there isn't a special interest that Google has. I mean, by the way, Google was one of Hillary Clinton's top campaign donors. So what you'll see is a continuation of people to grow in different ways and rallies. But what that is going to do is create a feedback loop where these tech giants will continue to say that these people are organizing, that white nationalists are coming together, that they're hosting groups, and it will continue to push into this mythology around the white nationalist, which is different from a white person who is a nationalist. But at some point in time, be a less of a divide between those two words, right? Like a white space nationalist. Yep.
Nassim Taleb has emphasized using the word localist, as in a lot of people confuse nationalism and localism, and it's due to a linguist trick. Like, something that linguists know how to do is change the meanings of words over time. I was reading about this in I believe it was Time Magazine or The Economist, and it's like a linguist trick, and they'll intentionally change the meaning of a word over time to the point where you have to adapt to keep up with the evolving language, and so you can create all these language traps and really put people at an inconvenience, and it can have chilling effects on conversations. But what I really found has a lot of explanatory scope is the concept of localism as opposed to nationalism, because nationalism now has all this connotation that it shouldn't. Like, I totally agree with you. Like, I identify as a nationalist, sure, right? And it's not the same as like what the white nationalist is, right? But I wouldn't use that phrase without context, right? I have started to describe myself as a localist, right? As in I don't like xenophobia. I love immigration and immigrants. Like, I love America too, And I love pragmatic, common sense, like fix broken systems, create an environment to maximize thriving and flourish. And I think localism has an emphasis on decentralization. And this is something I've been grappling with a little bit, because I do see people trying to pin this label on people where it shouldn't be. And like you said, it's creating this mythology of the white nationalist.
Yeah, I think, and you can see this very clearly in Charlottesville, for instance, which is a hot topic, because we know what the outcome of Charlottesville was. Is there were, it was essentially a nationalist, organized nationalist sort of convening of people, demonstration, if you will, just to show that, you know, whatever, it was just a demonstration that actual white nationalists showed up to, right? And what ended up happening was Antifa showed up. There were spats between Antifa and what I think was the forerunners of what could be seen as the Proud Boys, but, you know, good guys who loved their country. And there were a couple of incidents that went back and forth. Now there were also white nationalists who showed up, people who were part of the Aryan Nation, who did cause trouble. But what the media did was conflate these larger groups, right? It said the handful of white nationalists, there may have been more than a handful that showed up. I think there were probably way more than a handful that showed up, was somehow related to this larger group. The truth was it wasn't, and I don't think that the organizers were really into that. I don't know them personally, but this happens regularly, and I see this regularly, and I know it because I've gone to demonstrations, and I go to demonstrations on the right and the left. I was really big into Occupy Wall Street as a libertarian. And I was a libertarian at the time. I was one of the founding members of the Tea Party movement in Washington, D.C. I was one of the founding members. There were people who were doing a lot more work than I was in it, but I was giving speeches, and I had an animated political cartoon at the time that was very heavily libertarian bended. It was very scathing on the Republicans who were running against Ron Paul at the time. And the Tea Party movement was nothing more than a movement that was created to fund the Ron Paul running during the for nomination of a Republican candidate for the president.
And then get co-opted by the Koch brothers?
Yeah, well, there was, nobody was let in on the dirty secret, but, we went from having a really strong membership. I mean, we raised $2 million in one night, really pushed against McCain and Palin, essentially, who were the candidates that represented the status quo. Nobody liked them, Palin and McCain. It turned out that McCain was actually part of the organized with the Obama administration. Basically, the IRS investigated many Tea Party movement people, and I was one of them. I got audited by the IRS for 5 years.
No kidding.
Thanks to McCain. But yeah, I mean, there was a lawsuit waged against it, and they won an injunction. I wasn't a part of it because it was for businesses who were audited by the IRS. Anyway, what you saw after this Tea Party movement, which made headlines, raised at that time a record amount of money in one night, which was $2 million. Now we're in 10 million. Several months later, the Tea Party movement trademarked. They were having a get-together on the DC Mall with something that they would never have given us, that had tens of thousands of people showed up. Sarah Palin, Glenn Beck, all of the people who represented the status quo that nobody would have had anything to do with were keynote speakers. And you saw Paul Ryan, who essentially was probably the biggest, what you would call a rhino that had ever existed, take the stage as Speaker of the House. He went from 0 to 100. Where did he come from? Nobody saw him. No, he never went to any Tea Party rallies. He had never spoken in any event. So where did he come from? Where did Sarah Palin get invited to speak at this? So, you see this happen very often in movements. They get co-opted very easily by whomever. You know, you don't get let on the secret. You can only surmise based on facts that you see who's responsible for it. Sure, I think the Koch brothers had some stake in it, but I think there are other players. The Koch brothers were only financiers, right? There were people organizing that, probably not on behalf of the Koch brothers. I think the Koch brothers were, like many other people who have financial interests, working in conjunction with people who have power, have political power. So, you know, who did this represent a threat to? And this you see this a lot throughout history, and I didn't realize it at the time. And I had seen some weird things when I was organizing anti-war movement in Florida, some similar things, but never to this scope and scale. So, you know, you can clearly see how the media can manipulate people very easily into thinking one thing means another. So that Tea Party that we were a part of all of a sudden turned into this Republican Tea Party, which was totally establishment. Everybody accepted it as the religion that they said it was. So, you know, taking this and going into, you know, the post-Obama era where we now have this president, and hearing everything the media has to say about this president, and with the perspective that I have is what's driving the conversation, what's driving the mentality behind what's called racist or racism, right? I'm not going to argue now that the president is or is not racist. I would just say that, like, you know, always take facts as an example to do the research yourself, you know? And I think, you know, too far, we see facts printed and we're like, cool, all right, it's in the newspaper, it's truth. But I've never seen it that way. And what's really funny about all of this is that, you know, Malcolm X years ago had quite a bit to say about the media. And he was a radical revolutionary. The fact that we have a conservative president saying the same things, and we call it caustic and disrespectful by the same people who would celebrate Malcolm X and what he had to say about the media, there's some sort of discrepancy. And I don't think the president's necessarily wrong that the media is the enemy of the people necessarily. It just has, I wouldn't say necessarily the enemy, I would just say that they have their own interests that don't necessarily align with ours.
I saw something Nassim Taleb say when he was trying to talk about this clusterfuck that's going on, is sometimes the facts can be true and the news can be fake, even, as in you can marshal facts in pretty you can marshal facts and endpoint. And I think that a lot of people don't even have an appreciation for the half-life of facts and the half-life of knowledge. Like, a lot of things that, you know, like, facts are not infallible themselves. Like, it was a fact that Pluto was a planet. It was a fact that sharks never stopped swimming. It was a fact that coffee was good for you, then it was bad for you, then it was good for you, then it was bad for you. And I think that you need to have an acceptance of facts, but like you said, it's really about following your nose and doing your research and listening to as many people as you can, and really trying to not create an echo chamber for yourself. And just because someone isn't eloquent like a Harvard neurolinguist like Steven Pinker, that doesn't mean, like, the source of your information doesn't determine its truth value, right? Anyone can be a source of truth, and it's not always as eloquent as we would like it to be. And, you know, language is an imperfect communication tool, right? So it's an ongoing process, you know, and that's why I really like what you said about people should care about facts to do their own research.
Yeah, truth is a touchy subject throughout history, because there's been no one philosopher who's been able to espouse what exactly the truth means, because what we see truth is just a product of biases, right? And if it's not, it's there's a lot of different legs to the octopus, so to speak. But like, truth can be a lie, right? Facts as they're presented can be lie. They can be biased. Look, newspapers all have their biases, right? Reporters all have their biases. They have an objective human experience that push their perspective on all things. The editors have their own. The newspapers have financial interests. Those financial interests are tied to the nation that they're a part of or claiming to represent, and they're all based around human experiences. But pick any two people who claim to have the same perspective and the same point of view, send them to the same event, and watch how they report on completely different things, right? It's just not, it's not feasible that we can expect to find the truth from anything. And I think what the best that we can do is come up with a distillation of the innumerable voices that we can have on any one subject to find out what the truth is for ourselves. And we should not expect that anybody is going to present us the truth, because more than likely they have an objective, and they have a bias, or at the very worst, or the very least, if they are telling the truth, they're only telling a limited perspective, right? Like that's the thing. Like so white nationalists did show up to Charlottesville, and that's all that needs to be reported on that. And by doing that, the public can surmise the rest, without having to say it. So, look, we've got a huge issue with like what is truth, and can anybody claim to have it? I see a lot of people use the term post-truth world. I don't see how we've ever been in one.
Well, if you're talking about objectives, as far as, let's say, you could call them the Brahmin class, for lack of a better word, the people who listen to NPR, go to all the prestigious universities.
Yeah,
they
the Brahmin class
have a vision, I think, of a totalitarian communist dictatorship. I don't think that's the world that they want to live in. I think that they want things to be business as usual. The reaction that I've seen from people who they would deem the deplorables would be something that I want to dig deeper into, which would be the desecration of our country in terms of certain industries that we used to hold in high esteem, like the steel industry and manufacturing in general, being slowly sucked away from us. And I want to get deeper into how exactly that's going on. But what I'm curious about now is, if you have a crystal ball, do you see this Brahmin class moving more to the extreme left, to more of like socialist communist left, which is a movement that's, I think, just as popular with Gen Z as the antithesis is? As far as these people who have been in power in academia for a long time, are the chickens going to come home to roost, as far as their more edgy professors having a much more significant effect on the next generation that's going to take the place of these Brahmins?
What is the Brahmin class?
Well, in India, it's considered to be the priestly upper class, people who are in charge of disseminating the religion of the state, so to speak.
Yeah, essentially, it's like religious leaders who are infallible to some degree. Look, I think there's a certain amount of gospel that I'm gonna put it this way. Like, it's the way I see it, because I've seen it come from. I think what you're seeing is human nature take its course. During the Bush years, I was having the same conversations, the same type of conversations with conservatives who would have guaranteed me that Iraq somehow had weapons of mass destruction, and that we should be bombing them to smithereens. And my reaction to them was that we should not be bombing another country to smithereens. And their response to me was, "Why do you love Saddam Hussein?" Right? So what I'm seeing now is no different than that, which is here is a supposition that takes dramatic action from a large group of people, being that of there's a certain type of speech which will be limited in this nation. My response is, that is not the case, that should not be the case. And the incoming response to that is watch your privilege, which is now turning into something a little bit more less descriptive of me. So I think what we will continue to see, because I don't think and I don't believe that this country was ever meant to work in a way that you see one ideology continue to push forward, that you will see a rebellion on the side of the right beyond probably what Trump is doing, that will be co-opted very soon by another group of conglomerates that will push, maybe not to the right, but in some very odd direction, and that we will continue to see, because I think this has been going on for a long time, that you'll continue to see a wedge driven in society that essentially is the pendulum that we've been experiencing. And the pendulum doesn't just go left and right, it moves around sometimes in weird orbits. What I think you will see, if I do have my crystal ball, is that people will continue to feel ostracized, want to have their voice heard, and probably act out more than they generally would. And I think what forums like Twitter and Facebook allow is for people to attack each other and be shielded at the same time. What I'm most worried about is a society where nobody says anything, because look, if the right rises up as in the political conglomerate that could come next, if Paul Ryan was ever president, for instance, what you could see is a Republican class of people who condemn the left and everything that they have to say just as easily as what the left is doing right now. And in that, what you will have is essentially a controlled group of people who would not dare say anything ever, because they will want to keep their job, they want to keep their livelihood, they will want to keep their children. Mm-hmm. If Child Protective Services has anything to say about it, and that is my biggest fear, is that we will live in a society of people who will not be expressive in any way, shape, or form. I'm less worried about what people on the radical left are doing. They're simply acting out a fantasy because they think they see what is right. But that is always the problem, is that people who think they are right and acting on behalf of those who are right are generally the ones who are purveyors of the most treasonous acts, regardless of whether it's on the left or the right. This may or may not descend into more of a socialist state. It may or may not go in more back into a nationalist type of dystopia, vis-a-vis Ronald Reagan or George Bush. But in any way, shape, or form, I hope people remain expressive and find ways to live their lives outside of the paradox, the digital or media created, because look, it's the internet now, but it was the TV and before that, the radio before that, and film before that. Public perception has always been driven. Public dialogue has always been driven. Publishers have been doing it. It's just a matter of where we are right now. So, it's hard to predict the future. My hope is that humanity can break out of their current state of stagnation and just start fucking being weird again and doing weird things, screaming in public, causing a ruckus, getting out there, doing things, making art, being creative, getting in people's faces and breaking them out of the mold. And that would be fucking fantastic.
Amen. Amen.
That is a great way to end this conversation.
When I think of check your privilege, I feel like a better alternative is noblesse oblige. If anyone really wants to diss someone and you want people to be better in their communities, and say that. And I'll end with, you said a lot about bias, and there's a physicist I'm a fan of, David Deutsch. he harps on this. He says bias is just error. And if you prioritize error detection and self-correction, like, you should be able to minimize it as much as possible.
What's up?
So,
We got some friends here.
What's up?
Just say you agree.
I agree with everything that this man says. He is 100% truthful, factual, and actual.
Exactly. No fake news here,
No
brothers.
fake news, man. This guy right there.
Thank you.
See, this is what happens when you break through the matrix. Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks, guys. Thanks again
Hope to see you around. Hope to see you around.
Man. Yeah, man. We'll do. And thanks again for taking the time to chat, man. I always love these conversations and love what you guys had to say too.
Hope
Thank
to talk
you.
All right.
more.
Have a great night.
All right. Take it easy, guys.